Welcome, strategy battle game players, to another episode of an unexpected podcast. And today we have our usual hosts, Matt and Evan Iverson, our new host, Ralisher, and also our guest, Kylie, who actually participated in the Nova Open tournament throughout this past Labor Day weekend, this first weekend of September. And so today we're going to be going over that. We're going to be going over kind of first off, just how Nova went in general. And then also we're going to be going over Kylie and Evan's game. So they specifically were in the top spots, the top 3 spots for the Nova Open GT. So we're going to be going over their games. And also a lot of that will involve some back and forth between Kylie and different members of the podcast as she went against a surprising amount of us on this team. So,
which I love that I got to fight all the really tough opponents on the course of this run through Nova, which was really exciting.
Yeah. And me too.
There you go. I still myself, of course, remain undefeated at Nova. So I won't be really going through all of that. But
because you win by fiat.
Yeah. So we're going to go over those. So first, just to talk about Nova just for a little bit, touch on that before we get into the games themselves. So for those who don't know, we have Nova is a convention that runs 4 days. It is not all Lord of the Rings. It is actually 30 different game systems across an entire hotel that took place in DC. And throughout this hotel, there's many large gaming rooms where you can participate, in various events. And so within that, Lord of the Rings has Chaos and Ardor, which is a 1-day event on Thursday, then doubles on Friday, which all of you did participate in. And
I did not, but yeah.
Oh, except for Alisher. No, yeah, that's right. You did not compete in that. And then you have the GT this Saturday and Sunday. I mean, I guess just to touch on that, that's kind of the basics of it. I mean, anyone have any thoughts about this year's Nova versus previous ones, especially in the aspect of the hotel itself?
I would like them to figure out Wi-Fi.
Yes, I would. Yes. I would very much like
Agreed.
that as
well. Yeah,
with having this being my only Nova, the lack of being able to connect to a Wi-Fi was extremely crippling, especially since I was coming from internationally, so it was like really awkward because I had no connectivity whilst I was playing my games.
Well, I mean, not only was the Wi-Fi a problem, but there was no cell service down there too. Unless you had
for just us. So for like Sigmar across in the same room, but Sigmar across the hall, they weren't having quite the same issues. It was literally in our spot.
So we were just in an invariable dead zone. Like
it's just
we were in the Bermuda Triangle of the Nova.
Yeah, because I went around. The Wi-Fi issue was talked about quite a bit, and how like we had the guy who was a troubleshooter for Best Coast Pairings, the app we were using to actually run the tournament. He's actually the creator of the app. He went over to the Sigmar players and noticed that they were running a 150-man tournament, and they weren't having any problem with players submitting their own scores for the most part. They had some issues, but not as nearly like what we were having. And so, yeah, it seemed like spotty. Like the 40K players, though, below us, they were done. Like no one had any cell phone service.
Oh, were they down in like the dungeons on the floor below us?
Oh, you never saw the 40K room?
No, I didn't.
Yeah, that was I went.
It was a cool room.
Yeah, it was like the Underdark, like a subterranean coliseum.
Yeah, it was a subterranean coliseum. That's what it was. Like it was so cool, actually. Man, now that definitely check that out next year if you go. But it actually is a really cool room. Evan, did you see that room?
Oh no, the two of us, I think we basically just saw like the entrance hall and then our room. Well, I don't know what you did, Dad, but I did basically no exploring there.
Yeah, I did take a quick turn around the vendors, but that was about it.
Okay.
See, I was lured down by the GW stand. I was like, I really was intent on getting a bunch of Lord of the Rings stuff, so I saw it all because of that. That's so strange. I submitted my scores for every single round. Had no issue with cell phone service or
T-Mobile. Are you AT&T or T-Mobile?
AT&T.
That's why. Verizon and it was the other mobile carriers.
Verizon
they were the ones who couldn't. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, so any AT&T player was able to submit the scores with no issue.
I wasn't even in like I couldn't even see the event on the app. I just had absolutely nothing.
Well, that caused us a tremendous amount of issues, but well, tremendous. We got around it pretty easily, actually. We just had everyone line up to submit your scores to the scorekeeper, which is traditional, actually, how we've usually done it anyway.
Yeah.
So actually, it was a pretty easily mitigated problem, but very annoying nonetheless. So I talked with them, and as far as future years, it's going to be a little tough. Apparently, that hotel charges per user on the Wi-Fi. And so if Nova were to make Wi-Fi accessible to everyone, just even the Lord of the Rings GT itself would be a large cost. I'm not sure what the cost is, but it's something like $50 a player or something of that nature.
Oh my.
Yeah, so they charge an extreme amount. So that's why they did not extend the Wi-Fi out.
Perhaps a different hotel.
Yeah, well, that could be another question. So the hotel itself, I mean, as you saw from just the food prices, was pretty expensive. So now, imagine how they're gouging the convention owners. So
yeah, I mean, just to give you a sense of how expensive the convention food prices. I used to have 2 children. Now I just have 1. But we ate. So
there we go.
Yes, we ate that child.
I mean, yeah,
the job done.
You probably saved several hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
But it was insane how expensive the food was, especially considering the venue's like in a super populated area with like plenty of other food options. So it's not like it was hard to walk down the street. But
I mean, I think that was probably the most business that Universal Donut has seen in a long time.
There you go.
So,
by the way, I hate to spoil it, Dad. Did not sell donuts, as far as I could tell.
No, it sold donuts. It did not sell many of them. So, Universal Donuts was this little. I mean, it was literally a like hole in the wall, breakfast and lunch place across the street from the hotel, that was run by this very nice Korean couple that I think was about 130 years old. And you would go in there and you would order your sandwich or whatever. At one point though, we went in for breakfast and I was like, all right, this is Universal Donuts, I'll get a donut. And then we're looking around and we're like, well, where are the donuts? And they had one like cellophane topped box of donuts that they appeared to have been purchased at the local supermarket.
They resold.
Yeah, that's right. And inside were like 4 like chocolate covered glazed donuts, and those were all of the donuts in Universal Donut when we were in there. So
what did they sell?
I mean, they had they had like egg sandwiches and other sandwiches
so they just like forgot to rename the store.
Yeah, exactly. And I think there were a grand total of I think 4 donuts in Universal Donut when we went in there. So.
Gotta admit, that's actually kind of hilarious. So, yeah. I mean, well, outside of the Wi-Fi, I mean, we won't really dive into the convention itself since we're going to be dedicating most of this podcast to the matches that Kylie and Evan played. But overall, new venue. We'll figure out the whole Wi-Fi situation, even if we have to move the Lord of the Rings table and swap with Sigmar. I don't know, but overall, successfully run event, and I imagine anyone else have final mentions before we go into the matches.
No, let's go into the list of matches.
All right. So as mentioned, Kylie and Evan took top spots. We won't spoil who actually won the event until the end of it, assuming you don't know already and are not on Facebook. But
you've been living in a hole.
Exactly.
With your tinfoil hat on.
Yeah, that's right.
And the door shut.
Right.
Well, I mean, it could also be, some of our listeners in outer Mongolia who just don't have access to any of this information. So
it's a good thing they have access to our podcast then.
That's
We're
right.
covering it for you today.
They don't have access to a democratic government, but they have access to our podcast.
So go ahead, Kylie. Well, for your first match, who'd you go against?
All right. Well,
actually, before we do that,
okay.
Lists. We need to know what they're playing.
That's what I was about to dive into. So I TLDR is I've been running the Dragon Emperor on my crazy around the world tour during this trip, and I decided to heed the advice of a couple of guys that I met up at Ardacon, specifically Michael Bradford and Kevin from the Netherlands. And they were basically singing Brogia's praises to me the entire tournament, saying I was a fool not to take Brogia. So I'm like, all right, fine, I'll take Brogia. I'll see how good it is. So
Why did
I
you
swapped
listen
out.
to them, Kylie? Why?
Well, as you'll find out, Brogia's pretty good. He's pretty good. So I had the Emperor, my girl Ratabi, who decided that now that she was off UK soil, decided to absolutely go gangbusters in this tournament. And I had Brogear and the same kind of similar makeup on my list. I did drop the amount of archers I had from 5 to 3, and I deeply regretted that because I figured, oh no, I'm in America. Everyone's just gonna just run at me, or I'm just gonna run out at them, because why would I need extra bows if everyone's, gonna be either horde shooting or horde combat? I'll take the shields. And then I found out that I really could have used a couple of extra bows. But that aside, I had 30 models, Brogi Ratabi, Emperor, handful of Cav, the drum, of course, and some acolytes and a Drake. So it's pretty all around, can deal with a lot of things, and as we
Got
find
a
out.
question. The Drake. Do you like it?
I do. Actually, I really do like it. It bailed me out in a couple of little situations. It bailed me out bigger when I was over in the UK at Worcester. But I just like it as an extra tool, right? Because you got the terror, you got the 2 attacks, 2 wounds at defense 5. So you're actually like not super tanky, but tanky enough that if you're on the flank or guarding like your back or guarding an objective, one or two warriors find it hard to actually get in and actually break through the Drake. And the Drake has like a great scare factor, right? Because you got that poison rule going. If you can get the Drake into any target with say a Rutabi, which is pretty easy on a 25 mil base, and get a wound through, it can really mess with your opponent. Like a single wound through on a Mumak, a single wound through on a cow, on a troll, on any sort of mid-range hero, and they're not looking too crash hot going in the further turns. So I think even just one in every Dragon Emperor list, any Eastling list, I think is worth it because it just gives you another tool. And I'm going to be talking about tools a lot going on in this game, but why would you leave a tool at home just because you don't know how to use it? I think that's a failing on the player's part to not recognize how you can.
I guess because they don't make the models is why most players don't.
I have many friends with 3D printers, so I was able to get Jeremy to run off like half a dozen of these little Drakes. So yeah, I really enjoyed it. The Drake was super clutch in a couple of scenarios.
All right. Well then, should we go over Evan's list? Or you just want to jump into the first game?
Yeah, go Evan's list, and then we'll do games.
All right. Well, Kylie was just talking about all of her planning and thought that went into this Easterling list and how she'd been practicing it all this time. I decided on my list, I'd say about a week before I was going to Nova. I got one practice game in and then I was ready to go. So I basically made the list off of, I guess it was a bit of a meta call that I did. I didn't really see a lot of terror and stuff like that at Ardacon. So I thought, well, I'll take a list that does really well against the big legendary legions like Assault on Lothlorien and the Easterlings. I think it does pretty well against both those legions. So I just took it, slapped down the list I had taken like maybe a year ago to a random local tournament. I'm like, oh, I'll take that. So it ended up being Azog on the Warg in Pits of Dulguldur with 2 Hunter Orc captains with nothing else as their war gear, and then Thrain the Broken because I wanted the warband drop, and then just I think it was in total 9 Hunter Orcs, and then something like 20-ish Gundabads, and then a couple Fell Wargs, and a banner in there as well. So it ended up being 38 models, a pretty solid list. Had some big weaknesses, obviously, but it also had big strengths as well. So I just took it and I'm like, oh, I think this will be fun. I might do well. So.
And as far as not taking the keeper, I had a couple comments of players who were watching you play the Pits of Dulguldur. They say they usually take the keeper. Your opinion on that? Just
I
wanted
mean,
more
you could.
March?
So March wasn't the problem. I already have like a ton of March in there. My main thought process was twofold, which is that I have a very all or nothing play style, in the sense that if I try to engage an opponent's hero, I generally do it to kill it. And the keeper is intrinsically a very risky model to play, in that if you lose any fight at any point in time, he is probably dead, because he is 2 wounds, no fate. And generally,
5
I
defense or
don't
something?
6 defense,
6.
but with a strength 4 hero on average, if they're 3 attacks, they can maybe burn a might point or something like that, and he's
Yeah.
dead like that, right? And that's not really how I like to play my games. I like to generally use my big heroes to threaten the opponent's heroes, try and burn resources off of them, burn might, and then maybe go in when I have an opportunity and a guaranteed kill, and the rest of the time just focus on the warriors. And I think the Hunter Orc captains are much better at killing warriors because of their additional attack, compounded with the fact that I also get, I think it was three or four more models taking the Hunter Orc captains compared to the keeper. So that was my thought process behind it. There were a couple situations where I think the keeper may have been more useful, especially in my final game, which we will talk about later. But I was pretty happy with the 2 captains.
All right. Well, then, so we'll go into probably your thoughts on that list in a further review of like Pits of Dumbledore Legion. I don't think we've done a review of that list on this podcast, so it'd be interesting to dive into later on. So, I guess, Kylie, your first game, and if you don't remember the player's name, I mean, I assume there's 3 players you certainly will know the names of.
I do, because as always, I've got my playbook.
Okay.
Which has all of the names of my opponents I've written up at the top, because I forget. I have a brain like a sieve, so I forget names like that. So I made sure to write them all down and stuff, so that I could, give everyone their proper due when I do my little recaps and stuff. But I was up against Avery in round 1, and he was playing Pizza Doggledore as well. Very similar composition, actually. He went with 2 captains, although one captain was a Gundabad captain instead of a Hunter Orc captain, just to have an option, I guess, as a tanking force. Defense 7 can be helpful in certain situations. And yeah, we opted into capture and control, which I sort of expected, because I figured I don't really want to play domination, and my opponent doesn't want to play breakthrough against a drum. So I figured, yeah, it's probably going to end up with capture and control, which I was fine with. But what made our game really interesting was this terrain feature we had in the center of the board. We had this ship that was like broken in 2. So the center of the ship was clear and open, but you still had the other, like the bow and the stern of the ship, just kind of like half sticking up out of the ground, and all these like little pools of water everywhere. So it essentially meant that the outer objectives were blocked off by terrain from the center. So you had basically 3 corridors you had to fight down and contest, because it's capture and control. If you don't contest the objectives, you're in a bit of a kind of a rough spot. So I knew into this game it was going to be on me to get to the objectives, because I was outnumbered quite heavily. That was one thing I noticed, that pretty much I think every game I played at this tournament, I was outnumbered in some way, shape, or form. That was both in the doubles and in singles. So yeah, it was an interesting start. I kind of like kept the Dragon Emperor back and left a gap for Azog if he wanted to come into that gap. But Rutabi was sitting just in front of the Emperor with the shield wall in front. So it kind of had like the shield wall here, the Emperor here, and then there's just void here between the terrain feature and the shield wall, and was trying to like bait models into that to basically set up a kill box. And my opponent did this nasty little trick where he threw all the wargs in with the fell sight to peel everything off and pin everything in place. And then Azog went in just full aggression, threatened her at combat, didn't know where he was going to go. So I was forced to spend some might early to try and like counter that off. I was debating whether to go with Tremor on Troop or Tremor on Azog, but I figured since Azog is such a key part of this list, I just need to get pressure. And my goal wasn't to get the knockdown or the strength hit through. The goal was just to knock off some might points, make him you know, maybe he hits a 5 on a resist and he's forced to burn some might and stuff like that. But turns out when you just roll 6s, every single time you go to cast a spell, it doesn't really matter. So he resisted the first couple of tremors, and it cost him all his will points to do so. But I was kind of annoyed that I didn't get 1 or 2 of those might points, which was pretty crucial going forward. And we kind of ground out a bit. He kind of really pressured my right and left flank, and it was one of those weird ones where like one side did amazingly well for me and the other side did horribly. So, for instance, his Hunter or Captain on the right flank went in to just a single guy with a couple of pike supports and then all 3 pike supports, and the guy just went 3 wounds, take off the Hunter or Captain. I'm like, okay, that's a good start. And then on the other side with Bane the Broken and stuff, single Hunter Orc just charges the Drake and kills it in 1 shot. Just straight up double 5s. And I'm like, okay, all right, well, I guess we're playing this kind of a game now. Kept grinding each other down to the point where Azog no longer had the peel he needed around him, and I was able to win a clutch heroic move off and get the Emperor into Azog through the Blade Wrath in and struck up, figuring, well, if I strike up, we're going to force out Azog's might points now. Have the Elven Blade, I'm a good chance to win the combat. And yeah, it turns out having an Elven Blade is really, really good because I won the roll up on the Elven Blade roll. Did 4 wins to Azog, knocked off all his fate, knocked off a lot of his might, and Azog was like, yeah, I'm out of here, and just popped the surprise attack next turn and just legged it, completely disengaged from the fight. So I was like, well, Azog's out of the fight now. It's just a slow grind to get on the objectives. And it was really tricky to do so because my opponent was doing really well at like boxing out and making sure that whenever he lost combat, he was backing away towards the objectives and keeping me screened off it. So I was having to like do shenanigans with like Acolyte throwing weapons to open up corridors and then sending models past the combats to create control zones so that Azog and the reinforcements couldn't get in, so that I had chances to kill the models on the objective to flip them back. So I managed to do that on the right side, but not on the left. And the middle was just a massive grind. And then the first time we got to roll to see if the game ends, I am so thankful that the Easterling Army bonus exists, because I was able to force the game end on a 1 to be rerolled and keep the game going, which allowed me to rack up some points, because there was 3 or 4 opportunities in this game where if the game had ended on that first roll, it would have been a minor win to me instead of a major win, and I really wanted that major win. It was like I lucked out on the game, just keep going and going.
I'm not gonna lie, this is like the first time I've ever heard anyone's Easterling Army bonus being clutch.
Yeah, it came in clutch, like so clutch. Like I was like, I had the game I think wrapped up. There was a couple of times where he could have maybe swung it back, but the nail in the coffin was on the first time Azog takes a Courage Chest. Not the first time, because he has the Hero of Legend auto pass, but the second time. Turns out throwing all those tremors at Azog really did matter, because he rolled Snake Eyes on his first Courage Chest and legged it off the board with the White Log. So
no way.
Yeah, that was like,
what does that take? He's Courage, what, 6?
I think he's Courage 5, but he's out of.
So you need 3 points. Oh wow, that's terrible.
So Ratabi did a job. Ratabi got into Azog a couple of turns earlier, but she died to Azog. But she took off 3 might points off Azog.
Yeah.
And then when the Emperor went in after the heroic moves and stuff had kind of come through, and I struck up and forced Azog to might to get the 6, he was out of might too. So he had literally no stats left to try and avoid, like literally
the doubles,
1 wound,
yeah.
No fate, no might, no will, no might or fate or will on the White Log. It was just him. So yeah, it turns out the tremors and just putting pressure on him paid me in dividends, because he ran. And at that point I went, well, the game's mine. It's time to secure and link up objectives. So I was like doing things like drumming my whole army, even though I had to get charges off just so I could get to his back objective. And yeah, I lucked out. Eventually I got onto the objective, secured a 10-0 victory. And yeah, eventually the game finally ended on a roll where I had everything secured.
All right.
Yes, super close, super dicey at the start. Had to really, really claw it back.
So 2 things just for all the listeners is one, that Nova played on a veto system. So you may have noticed Kylie got to choose that she wanted to play capture and control. It's the same with all the players. They all get to veto 1 scenario. So they end up playing the best for themselves in that pool, theoretically, assuming they do it correctly. And then the second thing, Nova actually does not have basic boards with generic terrain is generic per board. Actually, every board changes drastically, and it's based on the themes of different areas of Middle Earth. So the boards will probably impact heavily their play style. In this case, you played in the ice bays of Forachel. That's what that ship was. It's Artifice's ship. Yeah. All right. Well then, and it sounds like it had more of an impact than I thought, because normally I put those ships down and I'm like, yeah, this is just a thing.
Specifically in this scenario, because you have that cross of objectives.
Yeah.
It completely changed the landscape of the game, because you had to pick where you picked a model to go. It was basically where they were more or less locked in for the rest of the game. There wasn't really options to reinforce back, like fully back across like you could normally do, because these two basically halves of the ship just creating this big line of sight blocking it was absolutely brutal. And I'm lucky I had the acolytes in this regard, because I was able to do some cheeky little, jump up at the top, run across the bow, and then jump down the backside. So I got a couple of those little things like kind of working for me, but at the same time it was screwing up my ability to reinforce and get traps and surrounds, because my opponent, like Avery, was doing a really good job of hugging these terrain features like they were worth their weight in gold, which in this game they were, because I was struggling to get, once I had really kind of like laid in and killed a lot of the Hunter Orcs and the Gundabats, I just couldn't get that last little push where I could just swamp, get the traps that I need, and convert the kills. So yeah, I got lucky that Azog ran away on that last turn there, because I think if Azog stays on his WAG for that one more turn, I think that game was definitely going to be a minor win, not the major that I ended up getting.
By the way, I talked to Avery about this. That was not the only time that Azog ran away during this tournament. I think he.
Oh no!
There were I think 2 other times where Azog rolled a 2 or 3 on a courage check, and I think one of those times I think was just a courage check to charge or something like that. But the other was also to run away, and I think he ran away again.
Oh no!
That's so
Jeez, my
weird.
heart goes out to him on that, because like that's so rough, and you got like this 225 point model on WAG.
Yep.
On the white WAG. So yeah, we actually talked about at the end of the game about whether or not it was worth dismounting Azog to get the white WAG's Fearless to stick around, because the Fearless would have been quite helpful and could have even forestalled and made that game turn into a minor. But at the end of the day, like, hats off to him. He made a call of like, no, I desperately need that extra attack on the charge.
I can roll above it too.
Yeah, like he valued that extra attack, and like that's the kind of decision making you have to make at these points in the game. And I think that really, really like shows his presence of thought of like, no, if I lose one combat, I'm only defense 5. A single Easterling here winning a random combat could just break Azog's back, and I can just lose my leader. But at the same time, he was like, I need that extra attack to ensure that I have the best odds of winning combats every other turn. And yeah, I mean, Azog, he's only strength 5. And I know that sounds weird, but to say he's only strength 5, but he doesn't have a 2-mana weapon. He doesn't have any of these fun stuff that like Bolg and like Dwarven Heroes have to get all these extra +1 to wounds and stuff like that. So he really relies on that knockdown. So, I mean, sometimes it pays off, and keeping the WAG is good, and other times like this, maybe the dismount was the way to go.
All right, well then let's see maybe Evan's thoughts on that whole thing throughout his games. I guess, Evan, your first game, do you remember the opponent and who you win against, or what army they had? Well, obviously army.
Yeah,
you know the opponent.
So yeah, so I rocked up to this tournament. I was super excited. I'm like, okay, I've noticed that there are very few Dragon Emperor Legendary Legions at this tournament. So I was super excited, because at Ardacon, I had played either 3 or 4 Dragon Emperor Legendary Legions in the GT, and it was just over and over and over again playing the same list. So I'm like, okay, maybe I'll play a different list. Round 1, I go up to my opponent. I'm like, hey, what you got? He's like, Dragon Emperor. All right. So
which is still so weird, because I never went against a single Dragon Emperor at Ardacon. So
I didn't either. I like
Evan
no,
got
Devin,
tortured with
you played it once.
That's actually
Sorry.
quite impressive, because there was like 20 plus Dragon Emperors at Ardacon. So
I
dodged
like
them.
really tailored my list for Ardacon for a Dragon Emperor or a Sultan Lothlorien. Did not play either of them a single time.
Wow.
And I
Yeah,
did play them once. This is correct.
I played 3 or 4, I think, at Ardacon.
The Iversons are just doomed to fight our Dragon
Yeah.
Emperor.
There's a picture that I think,
Bane of the East.
yeah, I can't remember who took it. I think Avery took it or somebody took it. Of I was playing Contest of Champions, Emperor versus Emperor, of the two emperors just going like this with their,
Oh,
with their
Rainier took
swords,
it.
like,
Yeah.
Rainier took it, yeah, with their swords like pointed straight out toward each other, but which kind of encapsulated Ardacon for me.
Yeah.
It's interesting you say that, because there was a Masters game that had the same thing happen, where it was, I think it was Capture and Control, two emperors basically just sitting in front of each other, and both played Rasta, both went into each other, and it literally came
Yeah.
down to a roll off, and one just went, I guess I win, smack, and just kills the other one.
Well, fortunately, only one emperor had Blade Wrath on them, and it was mine. So,
Yes,
but
yeah.
That'll do it.
yeah,
All right. Well, I had this incredibly this unique list that I had never seen before. So thankfully though, because I had played against it so many times at Ardacon, I was pretty well versed on what it can do and what it can't do. So basically, immediately what I knew I wanted in this objective game is I didn't want it to go in the center. So I was very happy when he vetoed first and he vetoed domination, because then I was able to veto capture and control, and we played breakthrough, which is a scenario where generally you do want to deploy in the center, but it doesn't always seem like you want to deploy in the center. And unfortunately for him, this is Daniel Helbig, by the way. Sorry, I forgot to mention his name. Lovely guy. He took that bait, and he instead chose to deploy his entire army on the left side near one of the breakthrough objectives. Breakthrough has 2 objectives on each side, and then 1 objective each in the back of the board. So I basically went, okay, right, this is perfect. So I put my entire army straight up, as far forward as I possibly could on the line, as opposed to his. I had a bit more models, so I was able to throw some of them off to the side to go and grab and wrap up the objectives. He put most of his army on that left side, and a portion with Rorgir and the archers back towards the back objective, sort of trying to use his range to do some damage to me. Round 1 basically was a bit of a stalemate. I sort of just ran in, didn't do a lot of damage. He was rolling a lot of 6s to win fights with his guys, so he was killing a decent number of my guys, but I was able to go and call the heroic combat with Azog, and he did not call the heroic strike with the Emperor. So I sent Azog right into the Emperor. I think it was either 2 or 3 wounds, and he just rolled awfully with his fate. So it ended up being the Emperor was on 1 wound, no fate at the end of that exchange. So it was very good for me, and now the Emperor needed to be super scared all the time. And then after that, I called ambush on the next turn, and I was able to get a lot of stuff done on that turn. I charged Azog into 2 guys, called a heroic combat. He at that point saw the opening on the Emperor, so he called the heroic strike. But unfortunately for him, Rutabi, who was also in charge range of Azog, did not call the heroic strike. So Azog went in. I think he burnt like 2 might to kill Rutabi. He botched the roll, but he ended up killing Rutabi anyways. And unfortunately, on the same turn, beforehand, he hadn't cast anything with Rorgir. He was trying to conserve the will, but he pushed Rorgir just a little too far forward, and I was able to run just a captain on his own into Rorgir. I think I got a trap in there, and just the captain just went in, killed Rorgir like that. And at that point, it was going to be very tough for him to get back, even though I think he was a little bit ahead on kills compared to me at this point. And then, yeah, at that point, it was pretty much over. He was super low on might points. And I was able to get Azog in, start calling heroic combats, and start burning might points off of the Emperor, forcing him to heroic strike. And eventually, obviously, he ran out of might points. And then Azog went in and killed the Emperor. And at that point, it was pretty much over. I ended up not quite breaking this game. He got very close to breaking me, but not quite. And I had all of the objectives uncontested. I'd killed the Emperor and I'd broken him. So it ended up being a 12-0. He was a lovely guy. I think honestly his biggest mistake in that game was just his deployment. He deployed a little bit back in the left-hand corner, which really didn't allow him to contest any objectives in that game, which allowed me, even if his heroes had done a little bit better or the dice had gone a little worse my way, and he had broken me, I still would have been on the objectives, so I still would have been able to guarantee the win, basically.
Yeah, pool 3 is such a deployment intense set of scenarios, because if you're not in the right position, you won't have the avenues later on to actually get in on the objectives, and that's why I constantly tell so many players, like, even if you have a shooting army in pool 3, you need to be on the objectives. You need to be at that center line so you can go to where you need to go and contest, because particularly that center objective, or particularly in a breakthrough, you need to have the avenue to get to that back objective as quickly as possible. And the closest way to get to it, the shortest possible route, is center of the board, down the guts. So yeah, I 100% agree with you there. And fantastic takedown on the Rutabi too, by the way.
I think he had really two options in this scenario. He could either just go right on the center line and then just fight it out and then send guys over to the objectives afterwards, or he could pop, I'd say, just out of 6 inches of the center and then call the drum and then try and use his maneuvering, his superior maneuvering power to his advantage and get around into the objectives and defend that way. And unfortunately, he deployed not on the center line on the left, but within charge range of my guys. So I was able to get in, charge him in.
Yeah.
I had one warband in the middle that I heroic marched forward and wrapped around that flank so he couldn't get any guys around to get into the objectives. And at that point, it was pretty much over.
All right. So I guess for the next game, Kylie, round 2, what was the pool?
Round 2. Round 2 was, I believe, the maneuvering scenarios. So that's Storm the Camp, Reconnoiter, and Divide and Conquer. And I had a pretty good idea of what was going to get played before we even started the thing. I am not playing Storm the Camp against Assault on Lothlorien, particularly Samir's Assault on Lothlorien. I was like, yeah, I'm not running into all those bows bunking in the corner. So I threw that right out, and Samir, by the same token, was like, I ain't playing the Dragon Emperor with drum shenanigans in Reconnoiter. So we're kind of like handshaking on the Divide and Conquer. This was really interesting because the deployment was incredibly deployment important, particularly on which sides you were going to commit which warbands. So Samir was always going to be 2-2. I was going to be 2-1. So the question came was, like, do I put Brogier and Ratabi in the same group and create like a little hit squad? Or do I sack Rutabi and or Brogier and keep the majority of my force together? And in the end, I kind of like went half and half. I put Rutabi on her own with the Acolytes and the Wardrake, and then put everything else with the Emperor and Drum. My original plan going into this game was I didn't get to pick the corners, but I figured one of the corners would give me a pretty clear run straight at Musgar. And then after I saw the deployment and saw how leaning to the Rutabi side of his like semicircle in his corner, I was like, maybe I just run a Druzag here, because the double transfix could be a problem in terms of like slowing down my kill potential. So I was like, I changed tactics and strategy basically on turn 1 after I'd lost priority, and ran directly at Druzag with everything I had. Rutabi tried to be cute, hide behind some rocks with the Acolytes, and that actually turned out to be very, very impactful, because it meant that the Goblin Archers that Samir did have, and hats off to Samir here, recognizing the importance of getting positioning on the table, didn't bother to move half and shoot for the first 2 turns of the game. He just ran everything straight forward, like full sprint, straight forward, straight towards the middle, calls march, gets the goblins in a good position so that I would be threatened going into turn 3, 4, and onwards. And I had to get really creative with how I was positioning Ratabi around this little rock, like trying to hug it as much as possible to limit space so that no more than a single enraged spider or bat could get into me. Because I was terrified of getting a spider and a bat into Ratabi at all times. So basically, the whole game for me was trying to make sure that my heroes weren't going to be fighting anything more than just one scary beast, not two. And that turned out really well. So first turn, managed to get in, dismount the orc captain, and eventually kill it. But in return, he bought enough time that Musgar and the Goblin Shaman got in range, and then basically just went to Ratabi, "You're going to be transfixed for the next 6 turns." And I'm like, "Cool. That's what I want to see with my 110-point model, just sitting there doing nothing for the majority of the game." And Samir played this absolutely gorgeously. The way he was navigating these combats was just, there's no other word I can describe it other than sublime. He did this gorgeous pivot where he was making it look like he was going for an enraged beast to kill Ratabi, and then instead pivoted to a fury to get the auto-pass courage so that he could put Drizag and a couple of spiders into the Wardrake that was regarding Ratabi's back, so that she couldn't get trapped and surrounded by everyone. And I was just like, that's an amazing pivot. Like, I had to come up with a strategy. Like, all right, how do I stop this? Because Ratabi's going to be fighting a bat and the spider this turn, and she's transfixed, so she can't call action to get out of it. All right, what have I got? And then I ended up sneaking Brogier into a combat, heroic combating through the gap that I just made off the kill, hoping that my pikes would do the work, and then managing to peel the bat swarm off the combat, meaning Ratabi was able to use her might just to win the combat against a random spider. And that was what the game turned into, was these small little micro moments of like him doing all these crazy things where he's calling heroic combats with Drizag to push spiders into priority targets, and I'm trying to do the same thing with my own shamans to like create openings. He did this really cheeky transfix on Brogier, and I was like, why are you transfixing Brogier? And then I looked at the table again and went, oh, Brogier is the one that's currently holding up this gap that I need to get in and peel off the bat swarm. And he got the transfix off, and I was like so worried because a spider and a bat went into Ratabi, and the one situation I've been trying to avoid the whole game happened. And yeah, Ratabi fighting an enraged spider and a bat swarm. I'm like, all right, there goes Ratabi. I'll cross her off. But I got very lucky on the to wound roll, and the spider just couldn't get the wounds through. You got a couple through, but 3 wounds and 2 fate. Just take them on the chin, and she'll be right. So it was able to fight back there. I collapsed the entirety of Drizag's kind of warband in his corner. The penalty for doing so, though, was meant I gave up the inside track on center objective. And center objective is worth the most points. So I'm trying to whole time, I'm spending 2-3 turns. I figure, how do I get to the center? How do I get to the center? How do I capture this center, or at least take away the 5 points for having it uncontested and trying to get it down to 3 points, because I have one side on the 2. I've got the break without being broken. And I should be able to sneak in the leader wound or something here. And yeah, I went hyper aggressive with the Emperor, drummed him straight onto the middle with the intention to dismount next turn, but he caught me flat-footed with a sneaky prowler, killing a guy and then opening up a hold and charging the Emperor. And I was like, crap, I can't dismount now. I was forced into calling some heroic defenses and went for some Hail Mary jump tests and stuff. This is where the Acolytes once again came in clutch. The +2 to jump test to be able to charge still was saving my ass, because I had 2 Acolytes jump over a wall, charged some Prowlers that were trying to fight the Emperor, which pulled off a significant number of attacks from the Emperor's combat. So the Emperor, instead of fighting 8-9 goblins trapped and surrounded, only was fighting, I think by the end of the turn, 4 goblins trapped and surrounded. So 8 strikes through heroic defense is a lot more manageable than copying 16 strikes through defense, where suddenly you're starting to lose some stuff. So the Emperor just took 1 wound, sent it away with some fate, and I was able to next turn get the dismount, capture the center, and that's basically all she wrote. And then once again, I talked about it before, how the army bonus was keeping me in the game. The army bonus once again prevented the minor win and allowed me to get a crushing win. get that major win by getting double VP just by extending the game an extra couple of turns, which was all the time I needed just to secure up
So
middle,
like
secure up.
cinematic. It's just
Yeah,
like
it was just like,
it's like
and I'm like, I said to Samir, I'm like, I'm sorry, mate, I'm gonna have to force you to reroll that dice. And he's like, really? You've already got the win? I'm like, it's a tournament, man. I got to chase all the VPs I can. He's like, yeah, all right, fair enough. I don't begrudge you that. So forced the reroll, was able to just punch through, kill Mozgar, grab the center, and yeah, but I won that game 11-0 according to my notes. So yeah, it was a really like micro intensive game. Like each of us was trying to jostle just to get models in the way and pin stuff so that we could get that one situation where we wanted, where he had two base against one of my heroes and I had nothing to peel. Then the one time he got it out was the one time where he just couldn't convert the kill.
Samir was actually one of the top Philly players.
Yeah, I'm listening. You guys carved up my Philly guys. Like, I mean, you're about to talk about your round. You guys like carved them up, man.
Well, you know what's really interesting, because I know who Kylie played. 3 of the players that Kylie played were from New England, and at least 2 were from Philly. And I'm wondering who that other one was. But
I guess we're on account. Avery, the first match that Kylie mentioned, is a New England player.
He's New England, yeah. And then you hit Samir, who's Philly.
So Maryland. One of them was from Maryland.
Yeah. I've got it here. It was Steven.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
He's not
Steven
one of
was the one. Yeah.
He's
he was
not one of ours.
He's not really Philly.
He's just a random guy to me. You know?
I will say, what was a big shock for me, particularly, I was like reflecting at the end of round 2 when we were eating lunch. I was like, holy cow, these Americans are forcing me to like go into like that next gear, because like when you're playing, there's always like a couple of stages of like where you're at in terms of compatibility and like where your brain functions at. And every time I kept playing, I'm like, my standard gameplay isn't going to work. I have to really get wacky and creative. So I was constantly finding myself having to shift into 6th pretty much every game. I don't think there was a game where I didn't have an opportunity, like where I couldn't afford the luxury of like kind of overclocking and getting to that point where I'm like really thinking in abstract thoughts and coming up with really weird ways of setting an engagement or setting a fight, because these games are rough. Like they were making me sweat. Like this Samir game particularly, like it felt like I had control in terms of like the kills on the board, but the thing that was constantly in the back of my head the whole game was, I'm not on the objectives. I'm not on the objectives. I'm not on the objectives. And like I could see Samir what he was angling for. He was angling to screen me off and secure the objectives that way. And I was dreading this super aggressive push forward at some point and boxing me off the objectives, but he was too afraid of the crack back with my cavalry and with the Emperor that he didn't go for it. And yeah, it kind of saved me a little bit.
All right. Well then, Evan, since we're going into your game that Alisher has alluded to, go ahead. What did you have happen on round 2?
Yeah, well, after that pretty big win in the first round, I knew I was slated to play up on top tables. So I thought, well, I'd say that Easterlings, generally with their low model counts, probably wouldn't do super well in this scenario. So even if they win their games, they probably wouldn't score super well. So I was super excited to play against a non-Easterling list. Came up against this lovely guy, Alex, who I believe is also from Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, what you playing? And he's like, oh yeah, I brought Easterlings. Okay. So I was up against my second Easterling list of the tournament. As far as I was aware, every single person at this tournament had brought Easterlings because that's all I'd seen. So
on international levels too, just everyone just running.
They're just all Easterlings.
I want an Australian to make a meme and just be like, just hordes of Easterling pictures of Easterling armies, and be like, Evan's nightmare.
I'll get Sean on it. Don't worry. I'll have it for you by the end of the day.
What we need to do is we need to get that picture of that Renair took of the 2 emperors doing this, and that's going to be that's the epitome of the new meta right there. That picture.
Oh, man.
No, what you need to do then is Photoshop Evan's face in between the middle two emperors.
Yeah.
Just terrified. All right. Well, I think this was like either my 5th or 6th Easterling list I had played against in the past 2 weeks. Because I had played a ton of them at Ardacon as well. So I was like, yippee, more Easterlings. So this was what were the options? There's Reconnoiter, Storm the Camp, and Divide and Conquer, right?
You got it.
So we ended up playing Reconnoiter, which I was decently happy about.
Yep.
Storm the Camp is definitely in the Easterlings' favor, I'd say, because they can sit back and shoot at me, and I have to go to them, and I can't engage them on my terms. They can get in with their pikes and really just defend a spot. And then Divide and Conquer is an interesting one, but due to their increased maneuverability, I was concerned that they were going to go and piecemeal my army. So Reconnoiter I liked. I'm still not a huge fan of the matchup, especially if the Easterlings player utilizes the drum in its most effective form, using it to feint, just pushing forward and threatening me early on and getting around and getting into my flankers and trying to stop them whilst also threatening the back of the board. Unfortunately, and Alex, lovely guy, by the way, I think this is really what ended up losing him this game was the initial way he moved his models made it so it gave me a huge advantage early on, which I was able to capitalize, where basically what ended up happening is he just went all in on one side of the board, sort of leaving most of the other side of the board open, -1 acolyte, which I could very easily get around. So I went, okay, I'm fine with this. I sent all 3 of my wargs over on the other side of the board. They were going to be my force that ran off the board. And then the rest of my army I could play very reactive with and just use to defend the board edge, and I should be able to win from there. He also made a bit of a misplay. He tried to get his
Huge
knight.
misplay.
Yeah,
I was watching that game.
He tried to get his knight with drum because I think he only had 1 cav model, which was his knight with drum, and he made the mistake of trying to move that model to try and get it off the board, which was a mistake for 2 reasons. One, it meant that he didn't have his drum with the rest of his army, which is very, very bad because it drastically reduces the maneuverability and the effectiveness of the Easterling force. And 2, because even if he was able to get it off the board, which he wasn't, I was able to jump in on it and just kill it with random guys. It wouldn't have done anything because with my 3 guys, I would have still tripled him anyways, and I would have still gotten the 7 points. So that was a bit of a misplay as well. But with that drum dead and my 3 guys off the board, it left him in a very static, immobile state where I was able to basically fight on my terms, get a lot of my guys in on his guys in favorable ways. I was getting some guys around into pikes, peeling them off, and then getting the shield guys in front. And when you have Hunter Orcs supported by Gundabad Orcs, if you don't have a decent number of attacks against them, they will win the fight and they will kill you. So I was just grinding through guys. Azog, I don't think he ever really got near the Emperor except in the last turn, because the Emperor was sort of out of position off on one side, and Azog was just chewing through guys and threatening Rutabi, and Rutabi was just basically trying to run away from him. But once combat hit, and he was talking about after the game how his rolling wasn't very good, and I'm inclined to agree with him. His rolling was not the best. I did kill, I'd say, a disproportionate number of models in combat. But I think even if the rolling had been more his way, it was just such a tough fight for him after I got those models off the board and after he lost the drum. I had a chance to get in on the Emperor in the final turn. I threw a ton of guys in on him. swamped him trying to get some VPs. Didn't throw Azog in because he had called a strike, so I didn't want to lose and give him leader wounds. But he rolled a 5, so I was like, ooh, this is great. I had like 10 attacks, only rolled a 5 highest, so I didn't get any wounds on the Emperor, but I broke him and I got the triple, so it ended up being a 10-0 to me in that one.
See, I saw that game and actually talked with the player afterward, and I remember he said the whole rolling thing, but I had watched that game. He lost before any dice were rolled, and his sacrifice of the drum and leaving an entire flank open was so puzzling, which I can only attribute to he had maybe was not very well practiced with the Easterlings.
What table was this? Was this the Osgiliath table or the troll table?
Neither, I don't think.
This was the trolls.
It
was
was
the trolls. This was table 1.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. By the way, table 1 is the troll table. It's got 3 trolls in the middle. It's got some houses around. It's got a lot of very small woods on it. And table 2 is an Osgiliath board, which has a lot of buildings on it that are ruins that you can run in and sort of use as basically impassable terrain to just sort of wall off shots and stuff like that. The reason I mention this is because a lot of Kylie and Mai's games were on these boards, so it's good to know these boards for future reference. But yeah, I think, and this is not a knock to the previous Easterling players I played, but I think what makes a pretty good Easterling player and turns them into a great / incredible Easterling player is how they use the drum. Because I can tell the difference between playing a lot of the Easterling players I played at Ardacon and Nova compared to specifically playing against Dad and Kylie, was how they use the drum. You guys use it to feint, you use it to move around, you use it to outmaneuver your opponents, basically. And a lot of the other Easterling players I played against did not utilize it in that manner. They used it basically just as an engagement tool. Yeah. It was basically just run up to my opponent and fight. And as someone who has played the Easterlings a couple times and played against them a ton of times, where the Easterlings shine is when you can get that favorable engagement where you can get onto a portion of the opponent's army and then just walk right through it because of how many attacks you have and your higher fight value. And using that is
just the one time.
Yeah, really, really how you close out games with them.
Have you like practiced against Matt's Easterlings a lot?
I've played them a decent amount.
Okay. I'm just curious.
Yes.
Okay.
I mean,
yeah, we've played. I mean, in the local tournaments we play in, we typically have like an Iverson off around round 3, and I've been playing a lot of Easterlings lately. So
because you guys played an Unexpected this past
we did
January. Yeah.
All right. So. Well, then I guess jumping into Kylie or game 3, what was the pool?
Game 3. I'm just quickly flipping to my notes and just realized I've got my opponent sitting right in front of me. So round 3, we're on the Asgiliath table, and I was of course playing Matt and his Goblin Town Horde. Now, when I heard I was playing Goblin Town, I'm like, oh yeah, it's probably going to be like a 60 model army with some sort of ring wraith shenanigan allied in. And I was like, nope. I'm playing against an 82 model army. And my face just went, I'm sorry, how many? 82. Oh, in Maelstrom. Oh, that's going to be a problem.
In the Maelstrom scenario, yeah. And
which require you to be on things.
Right. And in Maelstrom, so I think I had to veto first. And of course, I vetoed heirlooms because there's no way I'm going to play heirlooms against somebody with a drum.
Yeah.
And then Kylie proceeds to hand me the game. How did you hand me the game?
Well, let me run you through my thought process, because admittedly, I hadn't quite clicked. I thought that Command the Battlefield was break and roll, not 25%. And I didn't twinge till afterwards that was the case. But Command, I opted into Command the Battlefield instead of Take and Hold, which is run to the middle, because I figured I've got an Easterling Dragon Emperor. with a battlefield-wide standfast. As long as I can break the goblin town, I should be able to cover all the corners and stuff, and be able to like fight it in the late game and just keep the game going with my with my army bonus and stuff. And then went, oh no, wait, it's 25% like halfway through the opening moves, and I'm like, okay, I made a mistake here. Probably should have ran to the middle.
Well,
that's
not only that, but so
Yeah.
we were playing on the Asgiliath board, and the Asgiliath board has, you know, a whole bunch of buildings and stuff like that, and it creates a very restricted center of the board. Where I was terrified you were just going to take hold ground, you were going to drum yourself to the middle of the board, you were going to put phalangites in all of those gaps, and by the time my goblins waddled up, they would be facing this solid wall of leveled pikes, and I was never going to be able to break through it. But Kylie, the sportsman that she is, said, no, I'm going to make a game out of this. And we're going to play Command the Battlefield.
We did get a game out of it. I will say that.
You did indeed.
It's interesting because when we opted to Command the Battlefield, now I have played this as a practice game a lot, both with my Easterlings and with my Assault and Lothlorien. So, and every time I played this game in practice, I have always gone first. I've always won that first turn priority. And there was a moment where we rolled priority, and I hit the 1, and then you got it. And I'm like, I don't know what to do now. All my plans were for me to go first, because I just some part of my brain just went, we go first. We always go first, because that's what.
So begins the long process of me handing. So Command the Battlefield is the one where you have the 4 sections, and I'm like, I got 82 goblins. I got the goblin scribe. I can just keep an endless number of people coming on whichever side of me. I got this in the bag. And then comes the long process of me starting to hand this game back to Kylie, and the step number 1 in this process is I roll, so I'm coming on first, but I'm like, I still have this. I've still got 82 goblins. So I of course will roll the scribe first, because there's nothing the scribe can do. The rest of the army has to like hinge on coming in around the scribe. So I rolled the 2 of the scribe. I think Kylie put me on coming in the middle of one of the sides. Probably keeping me away from the corners where I'm more likely to be able to surround the scribe.
I chose a part of the board where there was less terrain for you to hide behind, so it was like you had to get a warband on either side of the scribe to really wall him off.
Yeah,
and as we're about to find out.
So, and then so I move the scribe on. I get him as far away from the edge as I can and kind of spread some guys out around him. But it's not enough to protect him from the inevitable tremors that are going to be coming if Kylie gets Bergeron in the right place. I roll the next warband. It's the captain. The captain can. So I bring the captain into the left, and I basically kind of seal off the whole left of the scribe.
Yeah.
And I got 2 more warbands left, and I roll Grinna. Grinna rolls a 2. And I think the way it was lined up, if I'd spent the 2 might, I couldn't have come on. I would have had to have come on the side, and that wouldn't have helped me.
Yeah.
So Grinna mites down 1. And then I have the Goblin King next, and of course the Goblin King rolls the 1. So I have one flank open now where Borgir could run up, and we hand it over to Kylie at this point.
And it turns out when you roll a 6 with Brogy, you get to choose where you come on from. So Brogy just went, that's a nice juicy scribe. Wonder how I'll go with a tremor. Double 6s on the first roll.
Oh, that's so
the tremor. And I was just like, okay, I guess I'll take that.
Scribe, of course, does not roll the 6 with his 1 will.
Nope. And then proceeds to fail the fate as well.
That sucks. So, that's like the key
literally
to Goblin
Town. No resources. I just took off the scribe. Now, I was expecting, after I saw Matt's roll, maybe it'll take me a couple of turns. First turn, the fate will get passed or resisted or something like that. And then the second turn, I'll have to use my might to force through the tremor to get the wound. And nope. Turns out,
I was actually fairly sure that. I was actually fairly sure the way things deployed that if you had not killed the scribe on the first turn, the scribe would have been safe. Because he could have diddy-bopped away, and all the other goblins.
I think it might have come down to a heroic move or something like that as well.
Yeah,
it's just by the time you would have got to him, even then, even 3-4 turns in, the scribe has already pumped goblins into every quadrant of the board. Yeah. It's just like,
Oh, by the way, to add insult to injury on the one reinforcement roll I had with the the Goblin Scribe, I think I rolled like a 4. So
Yeah.
so Goblin
Yeah.
Scribe was a big 0 for this game.
Yeah. So I had a plan. I figured I could deal with the Goblin Scribe, maybe bringing on 2 batches worth, 2, 3 at the absolute most. But I thought I could handle 2 batches of goblins coming on in a random section. Like I have the drum, I have Cav, I can go, I find them, isolate them, kill them, and then come back to my army with the drum. So Ratabi rolled really well. She rolled a 5, came on right next to Brogier, just anchored. So I had basically Ratabi, Brogier, and their little shooting kind of nook, and I rolled the 1 with the Emperor, and I turned to Matt and went, excellent. Turn 2. And then we moved into turn 2, and I didn't realize it at the turn, but Matt reckons that this is where he made the biggest mistake.
Yeah, this is where I handed the game back to Kylie.
I'm still not 100% convinced, because I thought, particularly after how you played the remaining turns, I thought you did an absolutely splendid job of keeping yourself in it. So Grinner rolls the 2 again.
Yeah, Grinner rolls a 2. And so I had 2 options here. I could spend 1 to go down and keep Grinner off for another turn. But at that point kind of risk, whatever I roll the next turn is what Grinner's going to be stuck with, probably. Or I could spend his 2 remaining might and bring him on right where I wanted to, which was on the far side of the board, where I could take his 18 goblins, just kind of grab the other 2 sectors. And I spent the 2 might to bring Grinna on that turn. And
it's a valuable tool out of the game now.
Yeah, and at least with the the 2020 hindsight, I think that was the mistake, because I brought Grinna on. Grinna and like 9 goblins go one way, 9 goblins go the other way to grab those other 2 things. Meanwhile, the Goblin King is kind of, and Gollum and the captain are all kind of squaring off against Rutabi and Borgir on the other side of the board. And then Kylie.
Well, I rolled, I think it was not, I think I rolled like a 5, which wasn't going to get me on the same. Yeah, right. It wasn't going to get me on the same board edge as Grinner. And I think I sat there for about a good 60 seconds thinking about it. I'm like, do I just come on with Rutabi and then drum onto the corner? And then I'm like, wait, no. If I can mop up this section of the board with the majority of my force and capitalize on Grinner being here, wipe it out before all the 5-inch goblins can get across, I might be in a chance to pull this game back. And I spent the might point, came on right next to Grinner and his crew, and then just proceeded to chase them for the next 5-6 turns. And it was around this point where I'm like, oh, I think I've got it. Like I can maybe isolate and stuff and wipe out this warband. And then Matt did the one move that I don't think I wasn't expecting, which was all these goblins decided, this is pretty tall terrain. Scuttle up, and just everything went up. And I at this point, like this shell shocked me. Like I was speechless and going, what? These are verticals, because I haven't experienced anything, not on this scale, not on this kind of terrain. Like this was not remotely on my radar. This was getting hit from behind kind of deal. And like I went up to Devin and tried to like get a ruling on it, and Devin was like, no, this terrain was designed to be climbed.
It actually really was. George Nicotitis made the terrain and designed it to be climbable.
And look, I got goblins. If they can't climb this stuff, who can? And you had no shooting on this side of the board either.
Well,
so
I didn't.
We ended up in this really weird situation where there's like a dragon emperor, a drake, and a bunch of pikemen like sitting down on the board, in the board, looking upwards, going, look at those guys up there. What do we do about them? I don't know. Why don't you try climbing up there? Like one guy climbs up.
One guy climbs up, and then I realized as I'm climbing up, I can't pike support going up.
Right.
Because I'm not in base to base.
And I think the one guy climbed up, lost his fight.
Lost his combat. And then I'm like, oh, it's fine. I'll just fight you next turn. And then he's like, no, it's defended because I'm higher than you. I'm like, oh shit, it is too. You back away, take your footing check, rolls the 1. I'm like, oh no, I'm about to take a whole bunch of fall damage. He falls down and dies, and then all the other Easterlings have just seen this happen. I'm like, not it. not it. And nobody at that point was like, we're not climbing. Okay, we have to find another way to win this game. So I'm like scratching my brain because like I knew I needed to break the goblins. That was like my primary win condition. I needed to break them, hope the courage test went in sort of in my favor, and be able to like contest the game from there. So I'm thinking, what do I have on the table that can hit things up high? And I'm like, well, Brogier's got Tremor. I have 3 archers. Again, this is another game where I wish I had another couple of archers. Would have been so helpful in this situation. And I had acolytes. So everything in my force was about keeping these models alive for as long as possible, because they were my only way of touching and hitting these guys climbing up on these annoying ruins per se. And the mercenaries did the same thing. They deep strike up high in a really awkward terrain feature that was super difficult to get up in, and it was just like it was this slow grinding process of like me drumming, trying to catch up, getting models in the right spots. And after a while I worked out, even if I 25% Matt, he's going to have 20 models on the table minimum, probably more when the game does finally end, because we were getting pretty close to the clock. And I went, no, I just got to sack the banner, dismounted the Emperor to pick up an extra 6 guys from the Palanquin, and just tried to hedge my bets. I figured if I can hold 2 quarters, just hold 2 quarters, I win the game through break without being broken. So that was my goal, was just to hold 2 quarters. And it was a slug to try and get things in the right position to hold these quarters, because at the same time I had to make sure that Matt didn't double any of the quarters as well. So it was this really cautious, like ebb and flow on the line, kind of like figuring out how many to send into a quarter and how many not to send, because particularly with how entrenched Matt was on the 2 quarters that he had, there was no way to play that like game where you have guys sitting just near the line so they can change which quarter they are in every
which
turn.
by the way was the second mistake I made, was in the Goblin Kings area. I had sent a bunch of guys over and climbed them up on buildings just so that you couldn't get at them. And what I should have done is just kept them just near the Goblin King, so that they were within his stand fast range. Because I think that actually flipped the game, because I think there was like the one turn when I lost like 6 of those guys up there, just through failed courage tests. And I think that was what flipped that last quadrant to you.
Yeah, because it was really interesting too, because I was hoping that you were going to fail courage tests with the models in Grinner's Warband that had managed to escape up the ruins and stuff. And I think out of the 9 models that survived, only 2 ran away.
Yeah.
So and I was banking on, because I had a good portion. I think I had like 12 or 10 models in that quarter. I just needed you to get down to 5. I think it was at the end of the game, and that just pass, and you ended up with 6 in that quarter at the end, so I couldn't double it. So it was.
I think we actually tied in that quarter. There was one quarter where we ended up equal, and I think it was that one where Grinner's Warband was, and then I think you doubled me in the quarter where my mercenary warband was, because you eventually were able to kind of climb up and get into my mercenary warband.
Yeah, Ratabi did work there. She managed to get up and get some kills, and I think I had just enough models in range with the remnants of Ratabi's warband, and the guys that come over from the Emperor are basically because you had the initiative first, because you had to call the heroic move to get the stand fast. I basically asked how many's in this quarter, and you said 4, and I was like, right, this model, and this model, get 8 in that quarter, got the double, and then with the break without being broken at the end, was able to get
you doubled me there. I think you exceeded me in that one side where I had all the goblins run away, and then I doubled you in the side with the Goblin King. So and then you broke me. So I think we ended up with, I think it was a 4-2 to you in the end.
Yeah, it was just a 4-2 to me. But as you said, if the Goblin King had have stuck around and kept that contingent up on that quarter where they all ran away, I think you would have. I don't think you would have maybe got the win. I think I could have finagled it to the point where I could have at least contested enough that I could have won the game still with like a 3-2. But it would have meant that, once again, by the skin of my teeth, I managed to walk away with a major victory when I probably shouldn't have got a major victory.
Yeah, I think if I had managed to flip that one side where all my goblins ran away, if I kept them within range of the Goblin King, I think it would have been like a 3-3 draw at that point, because I think I would have had 3 points for sectors, you would have had 2 points for sectors and 1 point for break.
Yes.
Yeah,
But I didn't. So oh well.
Well, I mean, from a TO's perspective, I actually did not know why Matt was climbing terrain, and I didn't know what scenario you were playing. Like, I actually,
because I had
because if I had command the battlefield, you would never have let that happen. Like, it's the closest thing to an auto win for Goblin Town as possible. And so I just, in my head, I saw Matt climbing terrain, and I'm like, yeah, no, I mean, it is designed to be that way. But like, now looking back, I'm like, that was pretty disgusting.
She had 18 figures and a Dragon Emperor facing off against a Mightless Grinna in 18 figures, and the only way I was going to survive that was to climb.
Again, this is why you keep honesty bows in your army. Like I really needed a couple more bows in this list. I think if I had a couple more bows, I could have done a lot. I had a much better chance at like knocking these bloody goblins off their perches, because like it's very rare I play a game where someone knows, understands, and most importantly is able to implement the rules of the game better than I can. And I'll tell you what, Matt, you ran rings around me in terms of
I was putting rules out of my butt in that game. I pulled the stairs rules on you.
Yes, you did.
Which nobody plays. Like,
I was like, yeah, he pulled the stairs on me, and I'm like, oh yeah, that thing exists. Oh wait, I got unmuted combat stats. It's fine.
I actually killed a guy with the stairs rule. There was somebody who lost. There's a pikeman who lost a fight, tripped and fell backwards, and then died because.
And then you won the combat next turn and killed him while he was on his ass. Yeah.
Yep.
That was I lost 2 models this game. The guy that fell on the stairs and the guy that fell off chasing the goblin up the tower.
That's so great. I've never even seen the stairs rule come into play. Almost ever.
It was a really batty game. I really enjoyed it though, because I think it was a very humbling experience too. Of like at the end of the game with all the dust settling, I kind of like looked at myself and went, "Yeah, I really got away with this." Like I converted the win, but
you got a major win. You got exactly what you needed for a major win.
This out of all the games I played. Out of all, like every game I played, this was the one win I was like, I didn't feel like I deserved this one. Like this one felt like, I had to, I just skimmed away with.
Well, be careful what you say, because 2 of the other people you played against are also on this podcast.
No, she deserved the win against them. That it was hot. Right. That was handed to them. So I guess, Evan, in your third game, who'd you play against?
So yeah, I've got good news for our faithful listeners. Congratulations to me. I did not play a Dragon Emperor Legendary Legion this round. I was so happy. I was like, oh my God, there are other armies in this game. I can play so many things. I might play against elves. Ooh, I heard Gondor is a thing that people play sometimes. Like, I was just so excited. And it was a mirror match, which I guess was kind of what I wanted, but also not, because it's just the same list I was playing. So the variety definitely wasn't there. But at least it wasn't Easterlings, so I was gonna take that as a win. But going into this game, I was quite concerned. Because the mirror match with Pits of Dol due to the fact that all of my models have extremely high killing power and are very easy to kill, including my hero in Azog, is a very, very volatile game. It can oftentimes go down to dice rolls, which is not something I was particularly keen on. So, and of course, as it was Maelstrom, we played Command the Battlefield as well, just like Kylie and Dad. And of course, I won the roll-off. So I was terrified. I was like, okay, what's he going to do? Is he going to pop up next to me, get his Azog on guys, start killing guys, and then start winning that way? I can't do the thing where I spread out and grab the different corners of the battlefield, because the courage on my guys, I didn't have a Warhorn, by the way. The courage on my guys just isn't good enough to be able to sustain that sort of engagement. So I needed to figure out a way to break this guy without being broken. And because of how volatile this list is, I didn't think there was a way. Thankfully, though, he deployed his army up top. I was off towards the side of one board edge, and he was up on the top. So we were on completely different board sides. And he was sort of up there. He sent some guys over his way around that way to the side, and I sent some guys to the side as well. Actually, I think they were roughly equivalent war bands. We had exactly the same models that we sent off, including one captain each. And then the rest of our guys, he had bows, I didn't, so he sat back and sort of shot at me, and I just committed my troops up, tried to get them around and get them into his army, sort of going, okay, I have one board half down here that he isn't contesting. I have one board quarter over here that I'll probably be able to take. He has one board quarter over there that he can take. And then if I work and try and contest that top board quarter, hopefully I'll be able to win that way. But he made an unfortunate error right before combat hit. There were these two woods, these two small woods that sort of walled off a section of his army where his entire army was bottled up behind them, and then there was this little gap that I could sneak my army through to get in on his army, and he did not leave a gap for Azog to get through.
Oh, you can't be making those
On that
mistakes.
turn, I got in charge range, and I was able to call a heroic move, and at my Azog went into combat, his Azog did not. And immediately I was like, okay, this made things a lot easier. So I got that turn off. I got an advantage on kills early on. I think I got 6 or 7. He like maybe 1 or 2. And because I had outnumbered him, because he had a Warhorn, I didn't, I was feeling all right. I was feeling pretty good. So next turn came around. I had been pretty tricky, and I had maneuvered it so that if I win the heroic move off next turn, Azog still will not be able to get into combat. And thank God I won the move off next turn. So yet again, his Azog had no opportunities to get into combat, and I was able to get in, call heroic combat with Azog, and kill more guys. And I was very slowly building up this massive, uncontestable kill tally compared to him. I think at that point I had killed like 10 or 12. He had killed like maybe 4 or 5.
It's like a third of his army already.
Yeah, Azog was actually not rolling too well, my Azog, but thankfully he had the might points to be able to spend the might, win the fight, and then just chop through guys. And then oh, poor guy, because the next turn after that I had still finagled it, so Azog still couldn't fit through.
What about the ambush roll? Didn't he want to use it to get himself out of this?
We both burned it, so he wasn't
you burned
able
it.
to get out.
Okay, guys.
Canceled each other out.
Yeah. And I was able to win the heroic move off again that turn.
Oh, now you're just kicking
turn in a row. His Azog just could
just
not
make him
get
feel the
into
pain of
combat.
this mistake.
He eventually just went, okay, I need to do something. So he dismounted it at his Azog and ran him into a woods to try and get on my guys. And at that point, I'm like, okay, I've already burnt 3 turns off this Azog, and now he's dismounted. I was over the moon about that. And at that
dismount
point,
should have happened turns ago. First turn.
At that point,
based on that situation, yeah. I think he was hoping to win
pretty
a
much clean up.
A 50-50 to win a roll off. It's not terrible odds.
No.
But that's assumption.
Yeah. I mean, whenever someone, like, from personal experience, putting the game on a roll off is a terrible idea. Like,
well, I mean, dismounting your Azog and running him into the woods is a terrible idea in general too. And if that's your best option,
you set up
you've got
wrong.
a problem.
Right.
Yeah. Something has gone horribly wrong.
I finagled it that the only way he could get in is sending him into those woods, which would drastically reduce his effective threat range. And when he finally did that, it was just too late. I had already sort of mopped up his army. He was broken. I got my Azog around, heroic combated into the White Warg, killed that. And then I just sort of surrounded Azog with like 6 guys every turn, and then just walked off with the rest of my army and just sat there and waited. I actually managed to get a leader wound on Azog that way. But yeah, at that point, he was broken. I wasn't. A lot of his guys ran away. though importantly, his captain did not run away, so he was able to keep his guys around to sort of help with his VPs a little bit. But I had so many board halves. I think it was 3 board halves doubled. I had the break, and I had a wound on the leader as well. And he actually got a wound on my leader. I think he either got a shot off on Azog or something, or a random wound, and I just my brain went completely blank, and I let it go through, despite there being leader wounds, points for leader wounds in this scenario. So thankfully, it didn't really matter because VP difference isn't overly important in this tournament. But I was still a little confused with myself afterwards, just like, why did I let that wound through?
I'm still amazed at your ability to get 3 board halves.
Board quarters. Thank you, Dad. You happy now?
Evan defies the laws of reality.
Yeah, actually,
we're playing in 4 dimensions. That's
Kylie and Dad were
SPG. You
3D. Evan is playing 4-dimensional SPG and captured 3.
Kylie and Dad were doing so terribly on their board that I just put some of my guys on their board half as well.
Just contributed to another game. Like, dude, here.
Fuck you guys. You don't get your points. I'm putting my guys there.
Hey, this is a family show. There are kids that are listening to this. Like you.
Exactly. It's all right. I guess
Devin will bleep that out in the editing. Right,
we'll
Devin?
get it
No, he won't.
Yeah, I'll write that down someday. To do that.
Yeah.
All right. Well, then I guess just for the sake of time, I suppose we'll jump into Kylie's 4th round.
Well, it's not just my 4th round. It's also Evan's 4th round as well, because we squared off in round number 4. And this game, I think if there is a game to better epitomize what it's like to play Lord of the Rings chess, this would be it. This was just moves and counter moves the entire time. To put it into perspective, we played 32 turns.
Wow.
It's a lot of turns we played. Once again, this was a game where I wish I had an extra couple of archers. Because it was quite interesting. So we were playing the unique scenarios, also known as the kill hero scenarios, with Ill Met by Moonlight, Assassination, and Fog of War. We basically handshook into Fog of War with our matchup, and I'm sorry, Evan. Once again, you have to play a Dragon Emperor for the 3rd time this tournament.
At that point, I was just like, oh, whatever. I'll just go with it.
To be fair, you kind of knew this one was coming.
Yeah, I was resigned to the fact that I was just gonna play the same army over and over and over again this tournament.
It was all just blurring into one at that point.
Yeah, it's as far as I can tell, playing the game now, I think just every list I see, there's just my vision gets a little blurry, and I just see an overlay of just a Dragon Emperor just appearing. It's just a horrible hallucination.
Evan's like, there's an alliance matrix in this game? Is that necessary?
Oh, I thought it was
I
all
haven't
Dragon
heard of it.
Emperor.
Yeah, that's right.
I thought those were the only 2 choices. There's more than 2 choices?
The Dragon Emperor battle game.
Our game was really, really interesting. So we had the Fog of War, and there was a really key moment on turn 2. We were playing on the Troll Shores board. This was basically 1 versus 2. And the Trolls...
I'm going to point out a very important thing first off, which is that it was sort of in contention throughout the tournament whether or not the trolls in the middle were difficult terrain or not. Some games I played on table 1, they weren't. Some games they were. In this game, we declare that they were. And this is going to be very, very important for our game.
Yes.
Because leave all the terrain up to the players. So if it's in contention, that's intentional.
Yeah, it made the game much more compartmentalized and much more closed off than it would have if the trolls had not been difficult terrain. So we both sort of anchored.
Did you mutually agree on
armies.
that, or did you roll it?
We just agreed on it.
Okay.
I
think we disagreed on
said,
it.
"Oh, I think it's difficult," and then I was like, "Ah, whatever, sure."
Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't really care. But it was set up in a way that we anchored both of our armies sort of on either side of those of the trolls. And then we had a very crucial priority roll off. I think it was turn two.
Turn two. And this was one of the ones where we both wanted to lose it, because it would mean onus would go to the other player, which meant they would have to make a proactive move forward, which means the other person could react. And since we both had marches called, I had the drum, Evan had a march from a captain, we were both in prime position to like really pounce on each other. I got lucky. I lost that roll, so Evan had to kind of commit, and he committed diagonally towards one corner. But it did leave a few of his orcs kind of not left out of the open, but not within the support range of the rest of his army. So I basically saw these 6 orcs over on one side and went, I want them. And the Emperor and everyone just made a beeline to the left-hand side of the battlefield, right-hand side for Evan. And I proceeded to spend the next, I think, like 5-6 turns chasing down these, like, half a dozen Gundabad orcs, trying to get a lead, because that's what I really, really needed, considering I was a 30 model army against a 38 model army. I really need to even up that kill count, because if I can get that kill count a little bit more even when I do finally take a fight, it'll be much more into my advantage where I can actually play it out.
Yeah, that set of movements was, in my opinion, the best case scenario that happened after I won that move off, because I specifically did that. So just to add other context, Kylie's objective, neither of us know each other's objectives, by the way. Kylie's objective was in the back right-hand corner of my part of the board, which was the direction that she moved her entire army in, where I had left very little of my army, like what she said, either I think it was 6 to 8 guys over there.
Yeah, it was like
just
6
sort of
guys
acting
in a
as speed
log.
bumps.
Yeah.
My objective was way in the back left corner, where she had basically entrenched a Wardrake and an Acolyte inside this house. Though thankfully I didn't pick the house as an objective. I had picked a woods a little off farther that way.
Like within 3 inches of it, there was this little wood. So our essentially our terrain pieces were diagonally opposite each other in 2 separate corners, which meant, I mean, it was the reason why our game was so movement intensive. Like, to put in perspective, I drummed every single turn, I think, in this game, and Evan used all 4 of his captain's might to call marches, because that's how much we just needed to shift into position, shift out of position, shift into position, trying to chase each other and like constantly, moving our pieces around as if we're calling check on each other's king every second third turn.
Yeah. And so when you move that direction, basically that was sort of basically what I wanted at that point, because I had won that priority roll off. I at this point I had sort of consigned myself to the fact that I was probably going to draw. It is probably the best outcome for me, because of your drum, I can't contest both sides, and I can't move my entire army together and not get sort of piecemealed because of your higher maneuverability. And you also had the ability to get Borgir around and just start throwing out throwing out tremors. You could push your acolytes into the middle and the trolls, and I can't really get at you there. And you can just throw weapons out of, which you did. But being able to pull your army to this corner of the board, which your objective was there, meant that you basically gave me the left side of the board, and I pushed the remainder of my army up that way and basically walled off that objective that I had, that I was going for. And then I used my remaining orc warriors, who had just were getting run down by these Easterlings, and I used them as speed bumps throwing them into the Emperor, throwing them into Rutabi, just trying to slow them down as much as humanly possible, and just burn through turns, because that was how I was going to get the draw. And you killed those guys. You got through them
easily,
decently quickly. Yeah, I
and
burnt
I think,
a couple turns, but
yeah, I think you actually, there was a moment in the game where I think towards the end where you summed it up the best. The first hour I was in control of the game, and I felt the first hour I think I played like that was some of the best Lord of the Rings I played in that first hour. But the problem was going into the second hour, I didn't exploit the lead I got, because I think I had Evan, I had like 14 or something ridiculous. Like I had a really,
I think in the first hour you
maybe it
killed
was
10 models,
yeah,
and in the second hour you killed 2.
yeah, that
Once
sounds about
you
right.
sort of isolated those guys and killed them, because my army was so consolidated and because I had Azog near, I was losing a lot of priority roll-offs, and you didn't want to commit too aggressively because you were concerned about Azog going in and killing stuff, which we
Yeah,
both agreed on after the game you should not have been. Or
yeah.
at least you
So
shouldn't have been as concerned as you were.
yeah, so because we talked at length about this game at the end, and the general consensus from both of us was I had a lead and wasn't willing enough to like I wasn't willing to be aggressive enough to force the issue, because at that point I had the advantage. If I had it broken without being broken, the game was mine essentially. But because I was so gun shy going into the combats and so worried about Azog going in, heroic combating, and then either duking out to the side and getting in a position where he could take away the points that I had for the objective, or him heroic combating and getting into Brogir, which was the hero I was trying to protect, which as it turns out was also the hero that Evan was trying to kill. I was so worried about this, him finding a sneaky angle, because I've been watching your games. I'd seen you find these sneaky angles and sneaky engage lines that I hadn't at this point. I was worried that I was going to like missing stuff, and it took me too long to realize that the Emperor at this point was expendable. Like it didn't matter what happened to him. His point, he had no points in the game. So what and Evan said this, was I should have just thrown the Emperor forward as bait, gone, come charge me, Azog, and used him as this big shepherding tool. Just keep pushing him forward, keep pushing him forward, keep pushing him forward, just to keep gaining ground, and then hide the army behind him, so that if Azog does, bite the bullet and run in, well, then I can just swing either defense up, survive the turn, and then fight it out next turn, or have a chance at actually finally starting the fight where I was. Because, and it's so weird, because I've been talking to players throughout the whole tournament of taking, like, there is an art form of taking a hit to give a bigger hit in the preceding turns. And I don't know, I don't know, something in my brain was just like, I've been watching Evan this whole tournament, and he's been consistently surprising me with some of the moves he's done. I don't want to give him that option of being proactive, when I should have realized that I was in the prime position to be proactive myself, to go forward, and I had tools in my army and the terrain, like that troll shores in the center of the board would have been perfect for Brogy to just run into and just go, I'm just going to sit here, and just have a ring of acolytes and Rutabi around him, and not being afraid of Azog, whilst the Emperor tips the spear, runs into the orcs, and starts to get the fight started.
Yeah. So I mean, for those who haven't played this matchup, I played this matchup many times. The Emperor is one of the few models in the game that can go head to head with Azog and kind of reliably win. And it's just because of that, it's that ability to, like, I'm going to call the defense, I'll take the punch. Eventually Azog will flub it. And when Azog flubs it, then you kill him.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you be worried about Azog just ripping the Palanquin apart?
No, I mean, Azog will do, because remember, Azog's not knocking it over. So, Azog's doing a couple wounds to the Palanquin, maybe.
Yeah, because he's winning on 5s.
Yep.
It's not like he has a 2 weapon or anything like that, or the ability to pierce. So it's
Yep.
just 4 dice winning on 5s. Like you'll take a couple of wins on the Palanquin every day of the week. And yeah, I'm it's one of the interesting things because at the very end of the game, I finally got Evan into a position where I wanted, where I kind of hadn't corralled in the corner, and then it was kind of the realization when I looked up at the clock and went, "We have played 32 turns, and I've only just gotten to this point here. Well done, Evan. You've successfully like stalled me out and ground me down to a point where I couldn't convert the win at the very end too. So yeah, I shouldn't have. Yeah, I keep thinking about it. Like I've got so many notes in this game written down in my little book about being proactive and recognizing win conditions, and I don't know, something was maybe I gave too much respect to Evan in this game and what the potential was, and instead of doing what the game was intended, this scenario was intended, which was to call the bluff of like he's not going to charge in an heroic combat past me to get behind me because, well, he needs to keep his wog alive and he needs to have something powerful in front of his objective to stop me from sneaking a guy through.
All right. Well, just for perspective of time, since we have 4 more games to get through here, we will run into the 5th scenario. So that's both of you guys taking yourselves down a notch right here. So for that 5th scenario, Kylie, who'd you play against and what was the scenario pool?
So I was up against Steven in To the Death, and this was my game to lose. Because obviously To the Death means banner points are a thing, breaking without being broken. And I had the Emperor and Palanquin, and my opponent was playing Bard with Lake Town, allied with Thor and Oaken Shield, King Under the Mountain. So he didn't have a banner because he was relying on his innate banners from Bard and Dubakar. So it was basically he had to come to me, even though he had the superior shooting, because there was no way in hell he was going to break my force with just shooting alone. And we were on the Easterling board, so I basically did I wouldn't say scummy, but I danced around these.
Would he have said
the
scummy,
drums.
Kylie? Kylie, would he have said scummy?
Yeah, no, he would have definitely said scummy.
Yeah,
No,
okay.
you're right. You're right. You're right. So I danced around these buildings because like the big Easterling temples and Easterling houses and stuff. So they provide a lot of line of sight blocking terrain, and they're also the perfect conditions for the acolytes to shine because there's this 1-inch like raised like stone outcrop around the buildings that I could just jump the acolytes onto, skirt around, throw throwing weapons, and then jump back down into combat. And eventually I pulled him into a choke. And if there's one thing Easterling love, it's fighting in a choke. And yeah, baiting him into the choke, I went in, re-engaged, and had the most amazing first turn of combat I think I've ever had. Killed 5 defense, 8 shield locked up, Iron Hills dwarves, and my opponent just went, "What the hell just happened?" My tanking force that was supposed to buy me time for my other forces to flank just died in one shot, and then Brogy just got off this 2 amazing tremors and killed 9 in the next turn after a pivot with the drum. And at that point, my opponent was down. I think he wasn't broken, but he was down 15 kills. We were equal on model count. I had the superior numbers, and he was completely out of position. So he just disengaged everything. And there was an option at one point in the game for him to like charge in some guys into the Emperor when I called a drum, so I couldn't go anyone else into support, and then he could have maybe set up a re-engage with Thorin and stuff. But I had a plan on dealing with that with Brogier and Ratabi, coming in next turn and horror combating and peeling off the combats. So instead of chasing the slim chance of getting a win at the risk of copying a bigger loss, he decided just to take the 0-2 loss and call it a day. So I kind of walked away pretty happy at the end of that game. Yes, it's only a 2-0 because my opponent decided to disengage at the last hour, but a major win's a major win, and tournament points are everything. So yeah, it's pretty happy about it.
All right. Well, I'm glad to hear that the rune board works well for Easterlings. That's a win in my book for a Nova.
It was super fun to play on. I felt like I was able to dictate pretty much every portion of the game that I needed to. Like being able to play around that line of sight and the acolytes doing their acolyte thing, being ninjas jumping up and down on stuff was just it's such a fun board to play on.
Acolytes be acolytes.
Yeah.
All right, Evan, 5th game. Who was that against?
Yeah, so I played against I believe it's Nick Goer, I think his name is.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he was playing the very interesting Mirkwood Rangers Legendary Legion. So Legolas Tariel, Ranger Captain, and then I think it was like 30-ish Rangers, something like that. So it was a ton of shooting, which was extremely terrifying. So I sort of went in to this game with a similar mindset of Kylie, which was that I was in the Osgiliath Ruins board, and there was this beautiful little house that had a ton of walls that just completely nullified shooting. So I was like, okay, I'm going to put my entire army in here, and then I am going to win 2-0. The only problem was I got bored. We played like I think it was 1 or 2 turns of me castling up in there, and I was not having fun. So I'm like, okay, I got to do something different. I'm gonna go and I'm gonna chase this guy down. Um, and
So why did you have to
um,
chase him if you had the banner and he didn't?
Because I wanted to.
Yeah, but like,
Because
okay, so
boredom.
he was
Because
coming toward
boredom,
you though,
definitely.
right? Because it
he
sounded by the
he
word
he was
chase, it sounds like he's running away from you, but it's like, well, but
no, he
oh, okay,
he was coming towards me slowly. He
got
was
it.
like moving 3 inches. He was shooting at me. He basically we basically sort of talked about it at the beginning of the game. I'm like, I'm gonna sit in this house, and he's like, I am going to shoot you a lot, try and wheel you down, and then I'm going to go in and fight you. Um
Which, if you're not
and
moving and he's not moving, that's a lot of turns of shooting. He'll get it.
Yes,
So,
that is. And I also did not wish to basically not play the game for the first hour while he shot at me. So I was like, okay. He had priority that turn, so he moved his 3 inches closer. And at that point, I'm like, okay, this is the opportunity. I marched out all of my guys off to one side where Tariel's warband was, Legolas and the Rangers warband was on the other side of the board, and then I just march, and I just chased him down. And he decided to fight, at least in some ways. He did a little bit of skirmishing, moving his guys back, sort of repositioning, but I was able to get Azog in, and because Azog can see them no matter what, despite their elven cloaks, due to the White Works fell sight, I
He
was able to get him
smells
in and
them.
start munching on guys. And I
just how
was
all wards should be. But
yeah, he actually got decently unlucky with shooting. I think he killed like maybe 5 guys before combat hit. And once I got into combat, I was in the driver's seat because I would take a Hunrook, charge it into a Mirkwood Ranger, put a spear behind, and then I've got 3 guys against his 2 shielding dice. And I usually win the fight, and if I win the fight, that guy is dead. So I just sort of walked through his army at that point, was able to get around, kill Legolas, break him, and I was able to secure the 12-0, which not only did I actually get to play the game, it made a much more enjoyable game, for me at least, than just castling in the back and winning 2-0. So
I saw part of your
that was
game too,
nice.
and there's a couple of really nice moves where you set up a heroic combat with Azog to charge Tariel off a dismount. That's what we like to back in Australia call the Kylie specials. And when I saw that, I gave you like a little golf clap. That was a really special move to be able to like set it up to look like I can't get in, and then oh I can dismount, and then just run in and just assassinate Tariel. And once I saw that move, I was like, yeah, Evan's got this game hands down. It was just a gorgeous move.
there you go. All right. So then, final game. All right. So going back to Kylie here and Alisher's first chance to talk. Let's go with it.
So round 6, what's the final scenarios are the objects ones. So we have seize surprise, retrieval, and destroy the supplies. I immediately knew once this pool came up and I was playing against a 56 model Lake Town Horde. I was like, yeah, I'm not playing retrieval. No, that nonsense can get out of here. I ain't running across, nearly 2 foot of no man's land being shot out by an entrenched Lake Town force. So that can go away. And Alashia was like, I am not playing the drum in seize the prize. So we ended up playing Destroy the Suppliers, which was interesting because it gave me the advantage in that I had the banner at the start of the game, but Alashia did not. But I kind of was running the math through my head, and I'm like, all it takes is Bard getting one heroic combat off and slipping past my lines, and then I'm in so much trouble because he can easily blow up an objective by himself, and even with the drum, I might not be able to get there in time because we're playing on the Osgiliath board, which is like really dense with these like streets and alleyways and stuff. So I had to really think about how I wanted to approach this game. So I can't speak for Alashia, but how are you feeling at the start of this game with this particular matchup? What was your plan going from
So
turn
I'll
one?
be honest, I really completely forgot that banner points were part of Destroy the Supplies. And I think like I realized that right after we did it. And given I think the density of the board, I kind of was like, shoot, because I think where it came down to getting objectives, I wasn't worried about that necessarily, but I was worried about like I have to get 2 objectives just to beat the fact that you have a banner. And that definitely that was an immediate concern because even if I get all 3 objectives, that's 6 victory points. You have 2 victory points. It's unlikely that I'm going to get all 3. You have a defensive army. And then beyond that, I don't know, like 56 models is a lot, but I play between Ardacon, me having 48 and Nova, me having 56. I broke that's 12 games. I broke 8 of those 12 games between Ardacon.
Oh, wow.
So I don't know what, like, in theory, the army should not break that quickly. But for me, like, I assume the army's going to break before I start the game just because, for whatever reason, they die very quickly. So in my mind, after I realized the victory points, I'm like, I have to, like, chances are you're going to break me. You have a defensive army. This is a very terrain dense board. It's going to be more challenging for me to get the surrounds that I need to really be able to capitalize on my numbers. I think you'll probably get the break. I'd have to get all 3 of the objectives and then prevent you from getting any of the 3.
Did we say what your army was? I don't know if
I didn't like
the
specify.
listeners...
I think we've said I played Army of Lake Town, but with Bilbo instead of just pure. If you play 650, all you get extra for Army of Lake Town's a captain, so Bilbo just makes more sense. Take Bilbo, drop down 2 models overall. So that from that perspective, it was definitely an interesting. I didn't necessarily want to play Seize the Prize, but I almost wonder if Seize the Prize would have been better in hindsight, only because you have 3 cataphracts. They're very fast. I do have up to 20 shots in this list. Like you're going to march the cataphracts up. I'm going to heroic march, obviously, move up 9. And then hopefully with 20 bows, one of them being Bard's Rapid Fire, should probably get some cataphracts. I don't know. But it definitely, it was an interesting matchup for sure. And it was actually the first, like Evan, you're talking about all these times you play Easterlings. I've never played Easterlings at a tournament. So I was actually kind of concerned, like I play a lot of games. Like I travel to a lot of events in the US, have never played Easterlings before the tournament. So I wasn't sure quite what to expect, to be honest.
Interesting you would say that, especially after having dodged so many Easterling Dragon Emperors at Ardacon, because so some of the Easterling Emperor lists were all over the shop in terms of top table, mid range, and bottom of the ranks. So it's interesting that you haven't really got some experience, which kind of explains a little bit of your movements, how you were playing a lot more cagey and a lot more conservative in the early games until I got that big move off on turn 3, where just to kind of like paint the picture for everyone, there was a turn where I lost priority, and I'm like, this is a turn where I can really do some damage here and really make a really big proactive move. And I called for the drum, but I also called a channel with Brogear to kind of threaten a tremor through like a whole bunch of guys. And they're like, everyone's like heard the stories of Brogear, like tremor and killing like 10 guys because he rolls stupid high and just hits a massive line. So Alashia did the smart thing where he dispersed his entire army, made it so a tremor was only going to hit 2, maybe 3 models, which is not worth the investment. So I pivoted to the Fury and juked my entire army to the left. which was Alishir's right flank, hoping that with the amount of models he pulled to reinforce the right, because it looked like I was running head stretch first straight at the Master of Blazetown, who was pretty much sitting on Alishir's 5 right objective, and I think enough models has moved away from the left flank where I can change, basically pivot, change which direction I'm going, and get over there and hope that I can mop up the remaining late town, and then use my drum to bring back the models that went aggressive on that left flank, bring them back to the right so that I can protect my own objectives.
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely an interesting like deployment going. I assumed like from the get-go, I assumed you were going to get one of them, because like if you're going to concentrate everything between Rutabi, the Emperor, and Brogir, you're going to break a hole somewhere. So I kind of figured you would get one. I definitely feel like I misplayed the two that I was going to defend. The way the board was set up was that there was this building kind of in the middle, and then there were some buildings scattered throughout. Two of the objectives were kind of funneled through the right side, my right side of the board, Kylie's left side. And there was a channel there, and then one of them was like by a building. I deployed more heavily on my left side, thinking I would take those two, and then hoping to be reactive on my right side. It would have been much better for me to have deployed on the right side, because I then would have been defending within the channel. And I think the right side of the board beyond that was technically more open in comparison to the left side. So in theory, it would have given me some additional opportunity to wrap around. It was definitely like, there was definitely more caginess on my side. So Army of Laketown plays just slightly differently from Survivors, in that obviously Bard is less of a consequential piece from the perspective of he's not your leader, but he's also less of a versatile piece in that you are generally not going to put the might points on Bard from Alfred. So that was a little bit interesting to try to navigate. I thought, in hindsight, I think I should have committed to a side and then try to throw Bard up the channel. My fear was that you would tremor one of the girls, and then all of a sudden like Bard would be gallivanting up to the front, and then nope, I'm coming back. I still think it probably would have been better to try to hide the girls and then really commit with Bard, and then try to pick a side and then come over from there. In the end, I tried to defend the objectives, and then I committed more on the left side with models. I don't know why, considering the low courage of the Army of Laketown models, I wasn't considering the Drake as much that I should have, because obviously you're going to naturally stand on top of the objective and you cause terror, and I'm, courage too. So it was definitely like,
I think Braga needed to lead a force running up that right flank, because that was my biggest worry, was Braga, leads it to contingent and just runs it that right flank objective. Because if there's anyone in your list that can, outside of Bard, that could put pressure on an objective, it's Braga. So if Braga runs at it, he can force through a courage test with some might and some will, get into the Drake, and you just need one decent combat to go through where you get the wounds through and flush him off the objective. That's why I was like constantly having to like pull guys back, because I felt like Bard, he could have gone for an objective run at any point, but kind of my gut feeling was that Bard was constantly being put in check by the Emperor and Rutabi, depending on what side of the buildings he was on. So he was kind of in this spot of like, he had to make, like, it was going to be a lot for him to find an opening where you could run in heroic combat and get past me, because that was the thing I was like, whole game I was worried about the most, was Bard finding a combat somewhere, heroic combating, slinking past me, and then I don't have a lot to deal with, a mounted 3 attack, 3 wound hero with 3 points of might, because all my might is forward being aggressive. So if I had to trade it out that way, I was going to be in a really tough spot, which is part of the reason why I was keeping so many of my cataphracts in that position to go. Well, if Bard comes forward, throw a cataphract in, block the heroic combat, just throw bodies onto him so that he can't heroic combat.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely worked out. Bard was kind of like, I really like Army of Lake Town. Bard he does a lot for the list, and I think on my generally speaking, I played Bard more passively than I should have. Bard was good because obviously of all the pieces that I have outside of Braga, I think Bard's the piece that I can cause you you have a lot of pieces where I have to react. Bard's useful in that that's one of the few pieces where you have to really react based on what I do. And Bard had some good moments. I think Bard sitting and shooting the cataphract off of your objective was definitely a good moment for him.
That was heartbreaking. I'm glad that I had planned for if that cataphract died with the heroic combat with the Emperor to throw Brogir backwards with a might point so that I wasn't as reliant on priority. But yeah, there was some times in that game where I saw Bard's positioning and Bilbo's positioning as well, going, man, a charge from Bard with a Bilbo slipping on the ring. That's a dead Emperor if I'm not careful. But yeah, luckily I was able to kind of see that a turn ahead and go gangbusters with Rutabi, kill the models around Bilbo. So Bilbo is kind of sitting there invisible, going, "There's no peel anymore. That's a problem."
Yeah.
And thus, the end of your run, Kylie, and earning the title of Destroyer of the Unexpected Podcast.
And Philly SPP,
not quite all of it.
Yeah,
not quite all of it.
You've quelled two
not quite.
risings at once.
You got to come back and defeat the champ, okay? Undefeated over here. Just saying.
All right. I will definitely keep that up. We have a game slated next time I come over. But yeah, because going into this last game, this is why I played this last round so aggressively, because I thought at this point, well, Evan is 12, 16, maybe even 20 VPs ahead of me at this point. There's no point in me kind of really trying to go for the big win, the first place. Yeah. So I'll just play this game out fun. If I get the win, get second, awesome, because that's what I thought I was playing for at this point. But yeah, this one felt really fun to play and felt really rewarding. That every time I came up with an idea or a strategy, kind of pretty much worked, which is rare, at least for me these days, of being able to come up with a strategy and execute it on the first go and not have to come up with a backup plan, which yeah.
I'm just glad you just earned this win, unlike the one with Matt. So
yeah, not cheesed it. Yeah.
But didn't have it handed back to her on a silver platter.
Yeah, because one thing I will say, Alicia, your gameplay after I made that big move and threatened that left objective was just insane. Afterwards, the shift in focus and your laser-eyed focus after you realize your back was against the wall was just insane. It was I've been likening it to a beast, like a wounded beast in the corner, the most dangerous when they're cornered and have nowhere to run. And at that moment, Alice just started lashing out, and I was like, oh crap, I'm being hit from everywhere at once. Suddenly the late challenge just went into full aggression mode, and yeah, I had to take a step moment, reset, and then kind of meet that aggression head on with my own aggression, and it paid out for me.
All right. Well, final game, Evan, how'd that go for you?
Right. I was on table 1, final round, so no pressure in this game whatsoever. But I learned 2 things, I'd say, mainly from this game. Number 1 is that Pits of Dol Guldur hates playing against Angmar, hates playing against Terror in any form. Because that was just a nightmare this game. I couldn't charge anything. And number 2, I learned that lists exist that are not actually Legendary Legions, which was crazy to me. Because I had literally exclusively played against Legendary Legions this entire tournament, 4 of which were either my own army or Easterlings. So playing against pure Angmar, no Legendary Legions, no nothing, was honestly a little bit refreshing, be it not for the fact that matchup is really bad, because my guys just can't do anything they can't do anything proactive. I need to be able to secure some sort of lead early on and then attempt to maintain that lead. I cannot take the fight to them. So thankfully for me, the object scenarios are quite good for me in this particular circumstance because I can ban retrieval, so I don't need to try and run after their objective. And then we either play destroy the supplies or seize the prize, and we ended up playing seize the prize. And I was able to run up, then turn to call ambush, wrap around the prize, and pick it up. Which at that point gave me what I thought was a crushing advantage until I realized that if you compel a model with the prize, you can make them drop the prize, which was horrifying. Especially after the Witch King went up and I think he 2-dice sap willed Azog, who had the prize, rolled the 6. I failed the resistance to magic, and then he took every single one of Azog's points of will.
Oh, so
All
you were just
three of
with the
them.
white logs.
And
Ouch.
I had dismounted at that point because I had dismounted Azog to
Oh,
try and pick up the objective. So I was terrified. But I did have a plan B, and that was throw in some guys, have them die, get broken. That I was never going to prevent that. But just to like briefly get through this game because this podcast has been going very long. It was a lot of walling off the Witch King. I was able to basically trap him behind orcs and get him so that he couldn't get around this really annoying building that was just a ton of difficult terrain. So he was basically stuck in this little alcove, and I was able to prevent a lot of spells on Azog and the White Ward that way just by not being in range of him. And really the big threat at that point was Gullivar, and I was able to put a bunch of guys all over the place in order to create no-fly zones, so he really couldn't land anywhere super painful to me. I couldn't wall off everywhere, unfortunately, because he was just killing through my guys and about to break me. But eventually what happened is I passed the object from Azog to the Warg, which gave me a couple things. One, the Warg is fearless, so I don't need to care about the specters. I don't need to care about breaking or anything like that. And 2, the Warg is faster. And 3, the Warg had a will point still, which was very, very important. The Warg had all 3 might points and a will point. So on the last turn of the game, he had just broken me. I was able to push the Warg into his half of the board edge, just isolated, sort of on his own, with the house that was blocking the Witch King still there, so the Witch King couldn't really get around to get into him. And then there was this nice little shack where I was able to sort of use the remainder of my very small amount of models at this point to create this no-fly zone so Gullivar couldn't get into the Warg. So he had 2 chances to either win this game or draw this game. One of them was he made a very smart move and dismounted the Witch King and was able to slide him in and get a try and get a compel off on the Warg. He rolled a 5, and I of course had my resistance to magic and my 1 other die to resist. I was able to resist, and I had my 3 might points. So even if I failed, that was pretty much guaranteed. His other chance was honestly, I don't know what I was thinking that turn. I left Azog 2 exposed, and he was able to barge with Gullivar into Azog. I had called a strike, but it was still super 50-50, honestly, because I had no might left with Azog, so I had to rely on either rolling better than him or rolling that 6, and I managed to do it. So it was a super tight game. Ended up being a 5-3 win to me, which meant that I had only gotten a minor win instead of a major win. And because of that, Kylie just picked me out. So I came in second place, and Kylie came in first.
Which is
And
actually
tournament
super
point.
shocking for me. I actually did not know what the score was until I was announcing it.
Yeah,
And when I saw it, I was
Devin did not know how tournament points worked because he was like, "Oh my gosh!" Like afterwards, he grabbed me. He's like, "Something went wrong here. Like, how could you possibly not win the tournament? You had so many more VPs." And I was like, "No, Devin, I didn't get that last tournament point on the last game."
I didn't know what your
Yeah.
tournament points were, really. I just kind of was like, well, you lost on table 1, so.
Well, actually, if you read the tournament pack, it will explain how tournament points work.
I don't
Oh,
read
who
that
never
thing.
reads that?
I don't
Come
read
on.
that.
Reads that.
Yeah,
I
Who
just
reads
show
players
up.
packs these days?
But Devin hasn't read the Nova tournament pack since 2017.
Yeah, nah, I'm going to continue to not read that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and after that win as well, like after getting like finding out that I had won the tournament, I was like shocked. I'm like, what? How? Like five? At
See, at
5
least
pins
you
to
were
a
shocked
draw.
with me because I was like,
Because
it was
I
the
was
same
like I was
reaction.
dumbfounded that had happened. Like I thought I was like, yeah, lock second. This is a great result. Second at Nova, like awesome. And then someone says, no, you've won. I'm like, no. And then like mapped it out for me. I'm like, oh my god. Those 3 games where I just managed to scrape in and use my army bonus to like convert the minor into a major
That
came in
mattered.
clutch. Like
Yeah.
it mattered. It mattered a lot. Like there was so many chances in this tournament where you know 1 pip lower, you know that 3 is a 1 instead, and yeah, I lose the tournament on countback with victory points scored. So yeah, I got have to say like owe the whole tournament to that Eastling Army bonus to continue the game, because that thing is dumb. It's like I don't know why that Army bonus exists in that particular way.
I don't
because
think
it's
anyone even thinks it's like good.
I think it's super good because it just allows you to win more and allows you to compete in games that you should win. So sorry, you should lose.
Yeah.
Like getting an extra turn is just like a whole turn is so much can happen in a whole turn.
I just realized that I never mentioned my opponent's name for the final round. I'm sorry about that. Brian Anderson. He was a lovely guy.
Yes.
He came
Seattle
through.
group.
Yeah, really, really good player.
Really good. Actually, I was watching
super tough
YouTube
game.
play because I like basically camped near you guys, and he was very solid player.
Yeah, one of the things I was really impressed with Brian's play, I caught some of his moves throughout the tournament, was his use of specters to set up hurl lines.
Yeah,
and to he wasn't using his specters as like aggressively as most people do, like using them to pull things forward. He was using them to pull things to the side and set up for other plays in following turns. It was really, really, really clever the way he was using his specters. And yeah, not a lot of players like know how to use specters to use it to block off shield wall engagements, and obviously again setting up the hurl lines for Gulliver, because yeah, it was really something special to watch in the few times I saw it happen.
All right. Well, then that's all the 12 games for all the people who podiumed. And so with that in mind, let us know if you want any other thoughts of Nova. For you viewers out there, just say in the comment section below, just tell us, hey, what are the things that you want to hear about for Nova? Maybe stats, everything that went on with it. But other than that,
one more thing. We haven't done a list review in a long time, and people I think have given up on us just because we've been doing so many tournament reviews where we're talking about our own lists. But we are coming out of the summer and the heavy tournament phase, so we are going to be starting to do some episodes on different subjects and army reviews and reviews of army tactics and things like that. And we will be doing some list reviews. So if you have a list you want us to take a look at, and you don't need it immediately, go ahead and submit it, and we'll take a look at it and give you our thoughts. And oh, by the way, we're also probably going to be moving the list review section to the end of the podcast rather than the beginning. So if you have a list and you want to have it reviewed and it's in there, keep listening till the end, because it may be there.
All right. And with that being said, we'll talk to you all very soon.
Bye, everybody.
Tribesman Games.